You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a very interesting episode of Ask Drone U as we once again talk about government overreach. One of my favorite things, Rob.
To thwart?
Yes. Well, it just sucks, though, that we're in this kind of period of time where, and if you lean left, I'm sorry, but this is the reality of the issue. But we see a lot more, Republicans do it too. They're both guilty, frankly, where they try to pass something, or they do pass something, knowing they can't do it, but they do it anyway, just to get it tried in court to see if it'll stand up. And then we have to deal with that until it goes through the legislative system, which as Americans, I think we have the right to protest. And so I think this is just another example of how, the federal government made it really clear who has control of the airspace, who can do what. We saw North Carolina violate that. The feds have never come down on North Carolina. And but because of existing or pre-existing federal regulations, I've never followed the North Carolina rules of having to register your drone and get their drone license, when the FAA makes it extremely clear that the only people who can create regulations for the airspace is the Federal Aviation Administration. This was done through the Commerce Clause by Congress. And once again, we have a left-leaning state trying to do something that they do not have the authority to do. And North Carolina, and I've even spoken to the administrator, the chief of the NCDOT, who said, but don't you see how creating our own registration system could actually help us create a safer environment to do trials for more advanced operations? And it's like giving up freedom for the quote-unquote veil of security is a farce, and it is a falsehood. We don't have to give up one for the other. It doesn't work that way. And also the law is very clear on what you can and cannot do. So we'll get right into today's question and just say that, when it comes to state regulators trying to implement control over the airspace, just know they can't. They literally can't. So anyway, long story short, I think that this will be an interesting show to say the least, but I also think it'll be fairly quick.
Hi, Laska Golden here, calling from state of Washington. I just accidentally found out by scrolling the internet yesterday that the Washington State Department of Transportation is now asking for all professional Part 107 pilots to register their drones with the state of Washington. This was a huge surprise. I heard nothing about this on any podcasts anywhere, or, neither did the state of Washington contact me. Is this a trend we're going to start seeing? Is there more legislation on the books? Hey, thanks for all you guys do. I'll show you my crashes real soon. Bye.
Thank you for the question. We look forward to the crashes. We always... I'm just going to say it. We always love seeing those. We don't wish that upon anybody. We don't want y'all crashing, except that everybody crashes.
Well, I applaud her because as drone pilots, we all know if someone says they haven't crashed, they're probably lying. So,
or they haven't tried hard enough.
Right with the knife. Ooh, I agree, Rob. So I think a lot of people will be surprised maybe for you to lay that knife down instead of me, but I'm proud of you.
Well, no comment. Anyways, it is what it is. But yeah, it's disconcerting, I think, at best. But I think I'll start with kind of her last question, and that is this a trend that we're going to see? If I had to guess, I'm going to say yes, that there's certainly going to be states trying to do this, at least those that are sort of bent the way that Washington is bent.
Well, and I mean, if you look at it, why? Because they're trying to raise money because they're broke.
It's all about tax because
they literally can't manage their own funds.
well, and it's also, I think, if I had to guess, speculate, because it is not applicable to hobby or recreation pilots, but only to commercial pilots. It's tax money as well. Another way to connect and make sure they're getting their tax revenue. In addition, I mean, the registration's only $5, so they're not going to get rich off that. But
yeah, we've seen that whole strategy before, though, of, oh, it's only $5, it's only this, it's only that. Yeah. How about no? How about a big fat no? Okay. Now, in our drone pilot field kit, if you're a Droney member, you have access to the drone pilot field kit. In the Drone Pilot Field Kit, you will find the FAA's memorandum to state legislators and to state governments, county governments, city governments, etc. And in that memorandum, it very specifically says you cannot create a drone registry at a state basis, including you cannot create a licensure or a way to get licensed for drone pilots as a state. This is a federally regulated... Gosh, this just pisses me off every time I hear this. It's like classic government overreach. We're going to try to do this thing until someone sues us and then we'll stop doing it. And honestly, it's kind of pathetic because I've seen so many legislators not really do their research, which is funny because Rob pulled up the Washington Department of Transportation's website. And literally there is a link to the federal regulations, which showcase you need to be federally registered, etc. On that same freaking page, literally, it has FAA memorandums for state governing authorities on what they can and cannot do. And dear Washington, dear state of Washington, my name is Paul, and I would respectfully like to say you cannot do this. Because there's only one body that controls the airspace. It is the FAA. Because if we had all the states trying to do their own stuff in the airspace, could you imagine how hard air travel would be? How hard it would actually be to buy tickets for it to go to any given place when you've got these tables of how you have to pay for everything. It just creates a conundrum of complexities that are not necessary. And so that said, yes, federal law does preempt the use. It's
it
very
brings
clear.
to mind the supremacy clause. And it's an interesting dichotomy because there is definitely some validity to states' rights that I think we would both believe in, right?
Sure.
But the supremacy clause very clearly does say that if there's a conflict, the federal law preempts the state law. And I haven't dug in enough to know if there's that sort of conflict here, but you seem to think there definitely is.
Oh, yeah. If I were living in Washington, which I don't live in Washington, which I have actually made a rule to not travel or spend money in any states that lean left because they have ruined our economy. They have ruined and stomp on our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. And so I'm voting with my money. I'm not going to spend money in California. I'm not going to spend money in New York. I'm not going to spend money in New Jersey. Like, there's a lot of places I absolutely refuse to go to because I'm voting with my dollars. And I'm saying that, like, it is not okay what you are trying to do. And I know a lot of other people who are doing the same thing. And that said, it makes you wonder. I mean, just yesterday, there was a report out by one of the government agencies showcasing how certain states handled COVID protocols. The top 15 states, 13 of them were run by Republicans. The top 5, well, yeah, you guessed it, Florida's in the top 5. Surprisingly, though, Utah was number 1.
I don't know if that's surprising, but carry on if you know anything about them.
I probably don't have enough information, to be honest with you. But that said, when it's these same states that really try to get their hands into things and do things without doing the research or blatantly doing it and saying, challenge me in court. I mean, I have seen governors do that, and that is not what this country was founded on. And honestly, that sets a really, really dangerous precedent here, ladies and gentlemen, because at some point you are going to lose credibility. And I don't know the last time you guys attended a history class, but a government's sovereignty is based completely on society's acceptance of said authority. And as soon as they lose that authority and credibility, literally chaos breaks out. So we already know, thanks to the fourth turning, that we are in the fourth turning, and we are in this crisis period from 2020 to 2028, which we had COVID happen, and we're seeing the ramifications of printing 80% of all the M2 money supply in the history of the United States in 1 year, and we're seeing the inflation. And we're being lied to every single day. Even this morning, core CPI came out 8.5%. Okay, that's the CPI formula that was implemented in late 2021. If we use the CPI formula that was used in the 80s and 90s, inflation is at 17% or an all-time high. That would be the same rate that Paul Volcker literally implemented, raising federal rates into double digits to stop inflation.
Well, and I would just say stop reading those, not talking to you, but look around you. Look at what you're paying for stuff.
Literally.
I don't need a CPI to tell me anything.
No, I don't need a CPI to say gas was $2.20 last year, and now it's $4.69. I'm like, okay, that's 100%, if not more. I mean, I'm not a mathematician here, but it's kind of like the Supreme Court justice being like, I cannot define a woman. I can't define math, but 469 does seem to be a little bit more than double 220. So I don't know, but I'm not a mathematician. So sorry to get political, guys.
Oh man, yeah, we went heavy on political this.
We were assassin.
So, apologies. Hopefully we haven't lost some of you.
I do find it funny though how I've had calls with people, and some think I'm a Democrat, some think I'm a Republican. I would say both of you are wrong.
You're here.
Anyway, so there's that.
I'm an American.
Yeah, I'm a libertarian. Anyway, so
is that an American?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an American libertarian. So
I'm with you.
Anyway, that said, this is just a perfect example, this story of Washington trying to create their drone registry that's a clear violation of federal regulations. If you're a drone pilot in Washington and your 401k is not paying out, well, you can sue the government and have a nice retirement payout by challenging this in court. So enjoy. So that's not going to be me, though.
I mean, do with this what you will, right? Everybody has to make their own decision as to kind of your own risk tolerance. What are you willing to put up with if you decide to go against this? I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of individual choice that has to be made here under the umbrella of what's going on.
For sure. If you've got the time and money, though, it seems like a sure win. But that said, what's going to be really interesting here is how the various drone advocacy groups respond to this.
Well, it's too late. I mean, it seems like there would have been... It's already law as of April 1st. We missed the, I'm sure others didn't.
Well, there are other groups that tout themselves as advocates for the drone industry. But if we look at their actions and not their words, it seems to be quite the opposite. As, again, with remote ID, there were only two bodies that came out on the same position inside as us that said, look, federally speaking, you can't do this or this or this or this or this. And ending up, they didn't do it. So, I mean, I think that... Again, I think it's a good point to see the reaction to this from agency groups, to see what they're really doing, what they're really up to, where they're really putting their money. Because I think that you might be surprised as far as what people are really doing. That said, we didn't do anything about it, but while we do advocate on the show and we advocate with the FAA, we can only do so much advocating before we go broke. And we don't, ask for donations or anything because we're not 501c3 or 501c4 or any of that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I would tell all drone pilots that that a government's ability to create regulations has been said before that arguably a government's ability to create regulations is only as good as their enforcement capability. And there's a lot of enforcement going on, whether it's legal or not. Well, that fight might have to come up. But that said, I think it's very clear that the Washinton State Department of Transportation absolutely has no legal validity for doing this whatsoever. You can check out those documents if you're a Drone member. Just download the Drone Pilot Field, not the Drone Pilot Field Kit, the Drone Pilot Advocacy Kit. Because once again, I need some regulators and legislators telling me how to fly like a hole in the head. So, but sometimes, what do they call it? A lobotomy? Sometimes that's necessary. I don't know. So that's a hole in the head.
It's just frustrating. I mean, I think of like the mortgage licensing system. Mm-hmm. It's a national system that the states tap into, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of creating, you can have 50 different like you said, as we opened up, this doesn't make any sense.
Also, their mindset is very clear. In looking at the purpose, where they showcase what UAS purposes would be guided by that legislation, this is not performance-based risk standards, meaning that it's a system setup that can expand and scale as the technology expands, evolves, and scales to do many other things. Like, are they going to put in there that you've got to register your UAS if you're doing, a tube inspection, you're flying down into a manhole with an Helios? Is that going to be in there? Is it going to be in there to do drone delivery with, for HeartGuard or something for your dog? That's what they're doing in Texas right now. I mean, this goes to show their lack of knowledge in even creating UAS regulations because they're not risk-based performance standards. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. That said, I'm going to stop this diatribe because I have no issue. I have literally spoken with the head of the NCDOT on the same issue, and he tried explaining in circles why it was a good thing to create a state registry for drones. And my question to him was, how do you expect anyone to follow the rules if you don't follow the federal rules? He gave me a kind of weird look. I think the answer said everything it needed to say, but he wanted to come on the show. And I told him no. I literally was like, no, no. I mean, like, you can sit here and try to swindle people and talk them into it. But at the end of the day, there's a rule of law to follow. You expect people to follow the same rule of law for other things. We expect you to do the same. So that said, I would love a cordial conversation with anyone in the Washington legislature or the governor to come on and talk about this. Honestly, this seems like a money grab. Honestly, it seems like rent seeking. Honestly, you can't do it. On that bombshell, that's going to do it for this show. My name is Paul.
Rob.
Goodbye. Do your damn research, you freaking governors.